Hi, everyone. We're here to talk about symbiosis in this series of short clips to catch us up on community biology. Symbiosis is when two kinds of organisms live together in a permanent relationship within their community. So, obviously, when we talk about these two members, they are two populations that are part of the larger collection of populations we call a community. It is a permanent relationship, which means it's got to be one that was permanently evolved, over time, selected for, in other words, because it had some important advantage for at least one of the members of the pairing. The idea of a symbiosis is very important in biology. Most organisms out there, outside your window, have some kind of permanent relationship with something, although it may not be very obvious. In the case of human beings, we have a symbiosis going on all the time with millions of species of bacteria and other microbes in our gut, for example. And these also live on our skin and so forth, too. So symbiosis is actually everywhere. However, keep in mind, it is something that both species have evolved with, and it's not something temporary like maybe a bird choosing a tree to make a nest in. That is not a symbiosis between the bird and the tree. It's something else, all right? But symbiosis, two kinds live together all the time. So next slide will show types of interactions. This is not critical, but a symbiosis falls into the second category, which means that they are interacting with something within their community, but another species, a population within that community. Intraspecific would be within the population itself. So there's three fundamental kinds of symbiosis, illustrated with this nice cartoon. The left one we call mutualism. This is where both species benefit, and for most people in the world, that's what they think of only when they think of symbiosis. But for biologists, we also know about commensalism and parasitism. These two are relationships where, in the case of commensalism, one species benefits and the other is unaffected by it. All right, so this tall animal here is benefiting the short little guy because it's providing shade or protection for it, but the tall guy is not harmed or really benefited by that relationship. On the right, we have the parasitism form, where the host, which is the red guy, is being hurt, or his health is being affected somehow by the parasite, which is the little green guy here. The parasite gets a lot of benefit out of this. The host is actually harmed in some way. However, it's interesting to know that, keep in mind, this is an evolved relationship. So most of the organisms that are hosts have evolved some way of surviving this relationship. And the parasites themselves have evolved to not harm the hosts too much, or obviously the parasite dies out. So parasitism is a very fascinating thing to look into some other time. Okay, carrying on, here's some examples of mutualism. The happy faces up in the corner show you that both species are benefiting here. In the case of a flower, certain flowers require certain species of butterfly to pollinate them. The flowers provide the nectar which that specific kind of butterfly wants. The butterfly needs that kind of flower to exist. So it's a very, very one-to-one kind of relationship. It cannot be just a random thing where some butterfly happens to find a particular flower around the yard and uses that pollen, but among many others. Okay, it's a one-to-one evolved relationship. Here's another one where we have a egret kind of bird consuming bugs on the back of the rhino. The egret does this all the time. The rhino depends on the egret to clean up its back from the bugs that live there. So they really need each other to maintain their normal lifestyle. Okay, carrying on here, a very famous example of mutualism is the clownfish with the sea anemone. There's a lot to unpack here. Don't worry, we're not going to get deeply into this, but basically both of them benefit each other. The clownfish gets shelter and is protected from predators because of the sea anemone stingers. The sea anemone actually gets better water flow around its tentacles, more oxygen actually, especially at night, where the clownfish is actually swimming and moving and helping fresh water come in there to give oxygen to the anemone. There's a number of other benefits in this relationship, but it is highly evolved, and it is actually rare to find sea anemones without clownfish in at least undisturbed habitats. Leaving the movie Finding Nemo aside, most clownfish never leave their anemone at all. They stay there throughout their lifetime. Okay, then we have commensalism. Commensalism is where one benefits, the other is unharmed. So egrets that are randomly eating bugs from any animal would be an example of that. The egrets shown here are actually grazing on the insects that are kicked up by the cattle as the cattle walks around in the grass. So they're using the cattle to help find their food, but the cattle doesn't care, all right, whether the insects are there or not. And it actually doesn't care whether the birds are there or not. So that's a commensalism, one benefit, one unaffected. Next slide. Commensalism with whales. We have barnacles. Barnacles are a kind of crustacean, actually related to crabs. The thing is they attach themselves to different kinds of animals. In the case of a whale, they attach themselves to the whale. The whale swims around, brings the barnacles to areas with more food, and then the whale is not really affected by that, as long as it's not too many. This is interesting because this starts merging into the idea maybe of parasitism. If the barnacles are too heavy and start affecting the whale's motion, then the whale's being harmed by that. In that case, the whale would be taking action to try to scrape the barnacles off, get rid of them. But in this case, with just a few barnacles on there, the whale can tolerate that and is not harming it. Then we have our parasitism ideas here. Parasitism is when one is definitely harming the other. The bottom right example of a worm in a intestine of some animal. Many kinds of worm creatures actually are carried in the flesh of a prey item. The prey is then consumed by a predator. The worm then gets out and attaches itself to the inside of the predator. All right. So tapeworms in human beings are one of the very well-known examples of this. Others could be ectoparasites, as we call them. Ecto meaning outside. These would be ticks or lice, other kinds of invertebrates that attach themselves to the hair or fur of certain animals and are there consuming its skin or consuming its blood and harming the host for sure in this case. The parasites, though, as I said earlier, cannot be too effective at collecting the food from the host, or else the host will be harmed so much that the host could actually die. So there's always this give and take between getting benefit and not giving too much harm in the case of parasitism. If the host's immune system becomes quite compromised somehow, hurt somehow, then the parasites may actually kill the host. So the parasites that evolve to be too harmful would be having that effect more often. So we have to be very careful about looking at, where the line is between harm and benefit. And for that reason, symbiosis is something that is really kind of under active study by biologists most of the time to see is a commensal relationship leaning more into mutualism or leaning more into parasitism. Here's an example of parasitism in humans where we have bed bugs that live in unclean sheets, unclean bedding. They're definitely harming to people. Of course, they don't harm us too much. Nobody normally dies from bed bugs in their bed, though they can be very annoying. So if we learn to live with them, and who knows, they provide some benefit maybe in the future. I don't know. Could be they clean up fungus that's living on the bed or something like that, maybe you end up having more of a mutualism relationship with them than a parasitism one. All right, uncertain about that. Okay, I've got about 4 minutes left of time for this 15-minute video, so we have to look quickly at competition. Competition is happening between animals within a species, such as the deer fighting for mates on the left. Competition on the right is more about competing for space between different species. So this one on the left is intraspecific, INTRA. This one is interspecific. These are not about symbiosis. These are about something else called competition. Predation is another kind of interaction, which is normally going to be interspecific. This is not part of symbiosis, all right? In this case, we have a prey and a predator animal, which are competing with each other for survival as long as possible. The prey will try to out-reproduce the predator population, for example, usually with higher reproductive rates. The prey may become very fast or very armored or something else, like the defenses we learned about in class, or it may develop toxins. Predators evolve defenses against the toxins. Predators can get faster. Predators can get more clever, all right, as well. That's particularly the case, say, with human beings who became very, very good predators in the past. So here's a summary table showing you what kinds of interactions are out there. They're not all symbiosis, just the ones in red, but these are all ideas to keep in mind and remember what the words mean. Okay, thank you. That's it.